G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 23rd of May 2026. The ends do not justify the means. The means define the outcome. It's a moral lesson in which how you conduct yourself in an emergency, how you conduct yourself when things don't go your way, are your true morals, are your true standards. They reveal who you really are. In a war, in a crisis, when things get tough, do you uphold your principles and standards? If you think terrorism and murder justified by war or just getting your way because you lost an election, you're not a good person. You're a mask. And more people are finding out who their true friends are in a crisis. We all wish for the Good Samaritan, but we see it less and less. When I ask for help, and I ask for help, I'm not holding my breath anymore. But for now, we shall see. Now, as Ukraine continues to receive military aid and weapons, they continue to use them to attack Russia. And so often they do. And even admit they attack civilian targets. They attacked a school at Starobelsk. And they were proud to have attacked a school at Starobelsk. But it was not Russians. It was just ordinary civilians. It's not a military school. It's just an ordinary school. Most of Europe remains in ignorance, blissfully so, by their own politics, where they will not look at anything that does not glorify Ukraine. That's a bad moral standard to have, where you have to choose a side and you want to ground down those Moscovies because they're the bad guys. Why are they the bad guys? Because the TV said so. Well, if the TV said so, they can't be. You haven't learnt your lesson, have you? The TV said, go fight the Germans. Then the radio said, go fight the Germans. Then the radio said, go fight the Germans. Then the TV said, go fight the Koreans. Go fight the Vietnamese. Go fight this. Go fight that. Go fight Iraq. Go fight Iran. And yet you all call them bad wars. They're the bankers' wars. The left cheered the revolutions across Africa, wanting their own revolutions. Now all of a sudden, Iran is a bad war. America's imperialist. But when it comes to Ukraine, they're cheering it on like there's no tomorrow. Like everything depends on this. Otherwise, tomorrow the sun won't rise unless Ukraine wins the war, you know. But there's no winning this war. It's already been made clear to you. It's already been demonstrated. The threats have been made. The promises have been made, not just by Putin, but by many in Russia. that you have crossed red lines. And now they're trying to formulate a response that won't trigger a wider war. China has made it clear that Ukraine is on borrowed time now, undoing all the work for the last decade to prevent World War III. The left want it. Iran thinks there's going to be a glorious future, that everyone around the world is going to rally behind them and conquer the evil imperialist. You forgot Persia was an imperial power, didn't you? Or China. Yeah. Or India. You forgot India was an imperial power because they spent so long telling you how they were under the thumb of the British. No, they weren't. They were willing partners to the British Empire. They provided millions of troops to the British Empire. They profited off the British Empire more so than Britain did. Yeah, when the British Empire ended, over 100,000 over 100,000 Indian millionaires left. There were more rich people back then than there are today. But they weren't as rich than they are today. But the equivalence thereof, Indian millionaires, more rich people left India. And it's again today, more Indians, they get rich. The first thing they do is leave India. Well, they keep all their holdings in India, of course. Was it someone said recently that the Indian billionaires, even the Indian government fly in. You know, everyone flies in from Malaysia and goes home. It's like Ukraine. Every time all the rich Ukrainians leave, every time a Ukrainian politician retires, he leaves. They used to retire to Russia. That was Black Sea. You know, it was a big thing. Some did retire, you know, to the south coast. None of them, or some. Well, sorry, a small handful on the southern coast of Crimea. It's only, you know, politics makes strange bedfellows. Because people you normally get along with suddenly become the enemy. And people you don't get along with are somehow your allies. Now, Russia's and BRICS are not in a good position. Recent trade disputes have shown this. India is trying to, and China, are all trying to leverage Russia to its side to control BRICS. Russia seems to hold the political card in BRICS, and India and Brazil are increasingly working together against China, and they want to leverage Russia and Russian technology and move it just to India and Brazil, just the same as China is trying to, and has successfully, in some cases, stolen outright Russian technology and now selling it as their own. India's now doing the same. That we live in a world of increasingly disrespect and in the highly competitive win at all cost, you end up with destruction of civilization. That someone will go, fuck it, I'm not letting them win, I'm going to press the button. We do believe and understand that in the past, Armageddon was not a fairy tale. That these stories of that when the tree of life is withers, civilization soon follows. But the liberals seem to think, no, utopia will spring forth. You won't live to see it. This idea that you have to generate a whole new world that you will never see, experience, and you won't even know what it looks like. You can't describe it. You don't deserve to vote. You don't deserve to be liked. You're not a good person if you want to see a new world rise from the ashes. Because that means you want everyone around you to die. Because you're such a pathetic piece of shit. You're so miserable that others are successful. Now the battlefield does not decide who's right. It only decides who's left. And it's often random and cruel. And the terror tactics of Ukraine has now put it at risk of China. I know it sounds strange, but if China puts off its Taiwanese ambitions, or if North Korea and South Korea achieve peace, more resources are going to pour into Russia. And Russia is going to pour more resources into smothering Ukraine to put it out of its misery. They will drive the Ukrainians out of Ukraine into Europe. If Belarus was such a threat, why is the security operation ended after 24 hours? Because they weren't a security operation. They were protecting the observers from Europe to spy on the Belarusian, Russian nuclear drills. But they're not nuclear drills. They're preparations for city destruction with non-nuclear weapons, in which, if threatened, they will use waves of missiles to destroy city capitals, decision centres, communication hubs, data centres, power stations, bridges. And you're going to say, well, if they could do that, why haven't they done it to Ukraine yet? Because they want a neutral Ukraine to be a buffer zone against traditional warfare. That if Europe doesn't have a bridge to Russia they control, right? Now, that's why they want, right? But they have a bridgehead. But it's precarious bridgehead. They don't want war. They don't want to be in the front line of war. They're only in Europe for the welfare. So Russia's not worried. Belarus is a good bulwark anyway. And these icy patch regions, even Finland doesn't want them. So Ukraine provides both summer and winter campaigns with relative ease of operations. So Russia wants to neutralize, and not in the Western traditional sense of neutralization, but to defang Ukraine so it can't be used against them. Just like China keep threatening Taiwan so it can't be used against them. Just like Korea. North Korea threatens the South so that it keeps on a back foot instead of thinking that it can cross the line of demarcation and liberate its brothers and sisters. Everything is done for a reason. And if you really want to understand war, you have to think like the enemy and know what the enemy wants. But instead, most people have this liberal kumbaya attitude where they can tra-la-la through life and assume everything. Liberalism is all based on assumptions and patterns of behaviour. Yet, as we look around the battlefield, we are starting to see the same old red dots. And this is a bad time for both Ukraine and Russia. If Ukraine can't hold Russia back, they will increasingly panic, lashing out and attacking a school, lashing out and attacking previously attacked targets, breaking the same rail junctions over and over again, shows panic and fear. It shows that Ukraine is not in a stable, winnable situation, that they are panicking, that they're afraid and lashing out. Only wild animals lash out. Ukraine is wasting military resources, lashing out at the Russian economy to manipulate the oil price, hoping that the instability will have enough panic around the world to side with Ukraine, cloak themselves with righteousness, and glory, glory, hallelujah their way to Moscow like drunken buffoons, thinking they're saving the world. Just like Operation Barbarossa. Now, yes, unlike Operation Barbarossa, Russia does not have the American industrial complex behind it. Nor does it have the British Empire relieving its the enemy of half its troops. So Russia, however, has Brazil, India, and China, who have in the past expressed desires for a quick resolution and have had private talks on how to resolve the Ukrainian situation, in which many rumours arise of a 10 million man army to stake out the Russian frontier to prevent a European invasion if necessary, which will create a worse Cold War situation than before, because your factories are now behind enemy lines and they will sell to themselves at a much cheaper rate than they sell to you. The next Cold War would be far worse and inflationary and ultimately destructive of the West, worse than the Cold War. Because this wall will not be torn down, it will be doubled and redoubled. The frontier will be colder. There'll be no travelling to these countries. Any foreigners in them, any non-BRICS members will be kicked out. They are mulling over many ways to control the world's economy now. The Strait of Hormuz is just a test to see how we respond, how far can push us, and how much resilience they can push back with, how much resolve they have within their own ranks. No doubt Brazil is doing their best to install fear of the West so that no right-wing government can come to power. Remember, Lula won on fear and panic and corruption thanks to Joe Biden. Joe Biden even admitted he helped Lula win. And then the first thing Lula did was cut US trade. But no matter how much I warn you, they doubled down on supporting the war. It's like the West is crazy. Western liberals are suicidal. Now, as we look at the battlefield, we do see now and again some changes, which shows that Russia is still in the phase of deciding where and how this war ends. And I still believe they're trying to clear their borders of Ukrainian troops, of Ukrainian aggression. And we don't know how. Of course, Ukraine thinks that they always have to push back rather than negotiate an end. But Zelensky's zero-inch policy is costing lives. But he doesn't care because he only cares about his life. The loss of life of others does not concern him. So the road to alignment will continue to be littered with dead Ukrainians because he likes the idea of dead Russians. He is Russian, by the way. I'd like you to know that. And as I said, Ukrainians, the Russians will push for here, because that gets them to here, gets them control of the Donetsk. They're pushing here because they need to get to cutting off this road, control these satellites around. Backwards and forwards here, in little places here and there, but they are firmly on the edge of this town, firmly halfway through this town. You see the other half here. Firmly on the edge here. And other parts seem to be dug in without any push. It's the range of it's the effective range of the HIMARS. See, when in short range, the HIMARS are too fast to defend against. So that makes fighting Kostnakovia very difficult. So they have to be able to get in quick under the arc of the HIMARS and now push them and threaten them with artillery and their own rocket systems to push them back. And once they push them back further, see, again, Kostnakovia is like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the industrial, civilian, working class, the administrative centres, etc., schools. These are all planned districts still, planned cities. Now there's a big push here. Now, Ukraine is trying to stop the Russians from completely closing the gap here. And it's like a death trap to keep pouring Ukrainians down this road into here. It's a trap. And the Russians have, in places, taken more territory. Just bog the Ukrainians down and go around them. And as the Ukrainians get more and more trapped in their own cities, and more of the countryside Russia controls, they soon go around them. And you end up like sieges of Pavlovsk, where 28,000 Ukrainians get trapped and killed because they refuse to surrender or retreat. Kostnakovia would be a disaster too big to hide if the Russians ever achieve the same. But I don't think it'll be. I think it'll be harder to encircle Kostnakovia, but it's still a slow death trap. Now, I'm not saying it's a death trap for Ukrainians only, but the Russians are taking more territory. But for now, it's all nameless places that don't have any real, but they are advancing. Could give you place names, but do they matter? They've almost taken all of this. It's just a rail junction for these towns. For what? Well, all these wide areas. Ukraine's huge farms. Ukraine has more farmland than most countries usualize percentage. Huge percentage of Ukraine was farmland. Most of Ukraine was stripped of forestry and turned into food production. There's all these dirt roads, all these fields. Huge fields of wheat and other grains. Now, these are artillery exchanges. These are frontline exchanges. And as you can see, the Russians moving to flank, to cut off. As I said, move up, cutting off. They're almost flanked and taken all of, almost all of Novosandrivka has fallen. But they're still reporting as if other areas are still under their control. They're not. Ukrainians push through, encountered a second line. They might infiltrate the first line, then they fall into the second line and find it even heavier defended than the front lines. The front lines are only light. They're only a tripwire to say, hey, the Ukrainians are coming in. The second and third line artillery starts opening up. The front line's just light artillery, anti-tank, that sort of thing. Tanks are usually between the first and second lines. The Russians aren't pushing their tanks forward. Modern weaponry has changed that. During World War II, there wasn't a... If the Germans had focused on Panzerfaust and had enough of them in the front lines, instead of producing 3,000, they produced 30,000, the Russian army would have been devastated without their tanks. Had the PK been brought into heavy production as... and Russia's made mistakes too. But I'm just saying, Russia seems to have forgotten how it really won World War II. And now they're realising that they can't live up to that reputation that they set for themselves. And Ukraine is smugly responding, oh, here, we're going to crush you like we did in World War II. They're trying to lionize all the Ukrainian nationalists of World War II as heroes against the Russian aggression. But you were the aggressor in World War II, and we all know it. Europe just doesn't know what to do because it's got no other way to, because it's got no control over Ukraine. Ukraine's an arsehole. And will always be an arsehole. And the only thing you can do with arseholes is isolate it. Let it burn out. Let them suffer in their own, stew in their own juices. There's no saving Ukraine from themselves. All the good Ukrainians keep getting driven out by the arseholes. Because Europe is full of arseholes. The left are arseholes. They can't stand losing. They always have to have their way. They always have to be right. And the thing is, they're low IQ, so they're often wrong. And they know they're often wrong. They see their own test results. And they cheer, oh, I got 55. So why then do you think you're suddenly the expert on Ukraine when you didn't even know Ukraine existed until 2022? When you ignored all the warning signs since 2014. Again, the Russians have taken more territory here, a lot more territory here. Again, now they've overrun a military base here, but obviously the Ukrainians have lots of them. And again, it's nothing of consequence for now that has been lost to Ukraine. Because ultimately, if maps are drawn and Russia only holds these little spurs, they'll get cut off, right? For now, these spurs, even big ones like that, when you're drawing maps, you're not going to wiggle around there unless it's a mountain. No, you're going to go Cut that off. Cut that off. Cut that off. Which is why they're focusing on, when they get a spur, widening it and widening. Or going up to a river or an existing border. Right? So they aren't cut off. That's why they wanted to go across here, because it is a human thing, right? Patterns. It's easier. Right? This spur would be cut off. As I said, you look at the landscape. You look how it all radiates out. Right? Once you get past, right, the politics of it, don't make sense to hold another country. It won't stay. Even after 100 years. Even sometimes, look at China. The pushback there. China's an occupied empire. It's tearing itself apart. Each of its old states are trying to assert themselves and shed itself of the central power, just like all the colonies wanted to break off from Britain because they were far away. They didn't want to make a decision about something over here that had to go all the way over here first. They don't like sending their tax money all the way here and only having some of it come back. No. It is, well, that's not how it really works. It's just metaphorical, but I think you should understand, right, why America was bound, and Canada bound, and Australia and many others bound to break off from the UK, just like, heck, how Taiwan, whose native population is not from mainland China, does not want mainland China to occupy it. And the Chinese there are more aligned with the thinking of the native population because they're intermixed with the native population. They don't want to go back to mainland China or be ruled by mainland China. And it's like Taiwan and Japan are very similar in that they both predominantly, like Japan's predominantly Korean, but most of the Koreans are they're descendants, not Korean in what you would call the traditional sense. They are descended from a mixture of Korean and Japanese. Most of the Koreans in Japan are bred out. They don't have anything other than some Korean ancestry, which dates back so many centuries. You just can't say. But you can't say old wars should create new enemies. And yet Ukraine is doing exactly that. And ultimately, China, Brazil, India are going to increase their support for Russia. I don't know if, how, or when they will do this. It just makes sense that if you're in an alliance and you just recently all met and shook each other's hand in a cross-pattern situation, you all agreed to prop up each other's economies, you all agreed to bail out Iran. So far we haven't seen anything there. Although China has agreed the Strait of Hormuz must be reopened and can't be under the control of one country. But then they turn around and support this Iranian council with Oman. Well, That's just trying to buy off the idea that everyone has to pay a toll just for sailing past your shores, just like Yemen. No, fuck you. That's bully tactics. You'll sink our ships because it would be like England sinking French boats for sailing in the English Channel. Although lately the French are that unpopular, the English probably would sink them out of principle rather than having them pay a toll. But that's what politics does. Enmity, strange bedfellows, creates wars where there should be none. Oh, wait. The attacks. The usual places, although according to Russian news there was an explosion in Odessa, that's not been reported. Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, multiple strikes on Dnipro and the surrounding area, one big strike on Kharkiv, couple of strikes on Kiev, despite their claims that they shot down over 100 drones. We'll get to that later. First, Empire of Elves, that's one word, empireofelves.myshopify.com. Empire of Elves book series by me is a world of magic and wonder. It's where science and technology meet fantasy, hope and wonder. It's a magical world that I have created, and I'm bringing my writing to life, first with merch. Now there's many artifacts here that will touch your heart and ignite your imagination. Right now I can't afford, but I have commissioned art for more so I can expand the product range with more character-based cups, various colours and designs. Yeah, Ukrainian drones claim to have destroyed 102 Russian drones, but as per usual, only 12 got through, and they were only hits at 9 locations. But they don't tell you those locations, all those locations. They only tell you the usual ones. Now, remember Viktor Orban. Remember how Ukraine campaigned against Viktor Orban because he cut off Ukraine. Well, the new incoming Hungarian government has looked over Viktor Orban's notes, spoken to all the parliamentarians, and almost unilaterally all of them agreed, opposition and government and the ruling party have all agreed to ban the import of a large amount of Ukrainian agricultural goods. They don't meet European standards. A lot of them are contaminated with It's the bulk of Ukrainians exports, by the way. They'll only import those that meet the strict standards of Europe. And also, they've been avoiding European value-added tax. Yeah. Ukraine has been extorting them over oil, and Hungary, whether you voted for Viktor Orban or not, Hungary doesn't care about Ukraine's bullshit. They know the war's bullshit. They know Zelensky can end the war. They know the Donbass and has been fighting against Ukraine for the last almost 15 years now, and Ukraine are a bunch of stubborn mules. They know what Ukrainians are like. They don't like Ukraine. They don't like Ukrainians. They want the Ukrainians out. They know how Ukrainians treat Hungarians and others. Ukraine looks down on its fellow Slavs as inferior. Because remember, it was the Ukrainian Revolution that spread to Russia and other parts of the Central European Commonwealth. again, Starobelsk College could be the beginning of the end. When the Chinese express deep concern, there are deeper Chinese students were at this college in a protracted crisis. The situation on the battlefield has human suffering, and China wants no side to have that suffering. But China will take steps to end the Ukraine war. And Ukraine laughs it off, thinking, we beat Russia, we can beat you, We got all of Europe behind us. Meanwhile, all of Europe is going, shit, we can't keep this up, our economies are crumbling. Ukrainian drones have been found outside of Ukraine. Again, this time it was Greece demanding an apology. But for some reason, other than Greek news, most of the mainstream European news does not cover this story. There is no explanation on how a Ukrainian drone made it so far or what size it was. But I suspect it was used for smuggling. Not because it wasn't an explosive. That wasn't an observation drone either. I would say it was a smuggling drone. Probably cigarettes. It's one of the most common smuggled drug today, tobacco. Ukraine smuggles Turkish tobacco into Europe. That's how a lot of Ukrainians made their money. Now Putin has vowed revenge. We know recently that in the last few hours, it's been widely reported on Ukrainian news, the Russians have moved Iskander missiles into launch positions. So tomorrow we should see a huge attack on Ukraine. But you can see that this is not a military target. Large apartment buildings in Russia have become under drone attack. And sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, drone after drone, every day, 1, 2 drones. This about building is empty, but it still comes under attack. And it's so Russian retaliation, it's not enough. It's not dissuading the Ukrainians from continuing the war. So Russia's saying, well, if you won't negotiate, we'll beat you on the battlefield. And Ukraine's thumbing their nose, saying, we're not scared. We have Europe behind us and America behind us. That's the most problematic attitude to have. Because when you support a little power, that little power thinks it can do no wrong, and it goes around kicking people in the shins. Sooner or later, the people that get kicked are sick and tired of being kicked. But they're not going to take a swing and a miss at the little kid. They'll take a swing and a miss at the parent. They'll do something to Europe. But Europe is so smug because they think, we have the US. But what happens when you lose the rest of the world? What happens when the rest of the world decides not to trade with you? You have been warned for the last 100 and something years to stop pissing people off. But because so much wealth and trade and technology has come out of the West, these other countries have said, we have to trade with the West. But now that they figured out they can steal your technology through China and India, because you made the mistake of educating them on how your technology worked and shifted all those jobs to them, now they're going to take them and turn against you. And now Europe doesn't know what to do because they thought it was invincible. That's the problem with thinking. You're invincible. You were told over and over again to be humble. But humble in France? No, I have a chip on my shoulder. It must be addressed for the next 1,000 years. My ancestors. And it's the same in the Middle East. The chips, every slight carries 100 years of vendetta. Antifa, feminism wanting to get revenge on how women were treated 100 years ago. Perpetuating myths to create power for yourself only creates enmity. When you create fear, you create hatred. It doesn't matter if Putin's a dictator or not. It's not your country. Let Russia sort it out. It's like if you haven't learnt a single lesson from the failures in South America. All the revolutions against Spain and France and Portugal and all the other powers that America has fostered around the world have all rebounded on them. All the revolutions Russia has funded and founded across the world have rebounded on them. All of China's politicking and posturing. Now, all these problems start to go away when you stop funding war after war after war. When you adopt, I'm not telling you to disarm. I'm not telling you to abandon Ukraine. I'm telling you that you better clean up your act in Ukraine, that a neutral Ukraine will achieve the same results cheaper than an occupied Ukraine. You don't need Ukraine in the EU. You don't need the European Union. A trade commission is all you needed. A Brussels trade commission was all you needed. The extra is just welfare for liberal academics, for corrupt politicians and lawyers to feather their own nest, to create trade deal after trade deal, to endlessly milk the public with buffoonery from commissioners who are quasi-elected officials with too much power and not enough oversight, and definitely not enough of them in jail. The gross inefficiencies and inequalities of government are the ones we need to address. Because far too many people with chips on their shoulders, with sticks up their butt, with noses trying to avoid the smell of their own shit. Yeah. And how can you think socialism works when you see such obvious problems getting worse and worse every year? Because the arrogance of those, the greed and envy, they all want to be Stalin, And once you figure out they're not able to be saved, that there's no reforming the Democrat Party, there's no reforming the Liberal Democrats, there's no reforming the Christian Socialists or the Christian Democrats or any of the other left-wing parties across Europe or the West. The Greens. Just a toxic reincarnation of the Nazi Party, who merged the socialists, who tore apart Europe in not one but two wars, are trying to do so again. in their arrogance in believing that a better society will emerge from the victory. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Please support the channel. Support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon. Buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree description below, in my profile. Scan the QR code on the screen. See you in the next video. Bye for now.